Welcome to the Greatest Plays Bracket Podcast, brought to you by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. I am John Schmelk, joined by the voice of the Giants, Bob Papa, as part of the Giants' 100th anniversary celebration. Our panel of experts, Bob of which was one of them, have gone back and selected the 64 greatest plays in Giants history to give the fans a chance to vote as to which one they think is the best. We've broken it into 4 16-play brackets. This is the blue bracket. Bob, let's talk about it.
And first of all, it was hard to get 16.
Let's talk about it.
I mean, we could have easily, for each of these brackets, we could have easily come up with another 4 or 5 plays from each bracket. Yeah. So what we tried to do is we tried to distill it by great individual performance, heroic performance, and then maybe significance of the performance, when it happened, where it happened, the significance of the game, which I think led us to be able to get it down to 16 seeds in each bracket. But trust me, there were way more than 64 greatest plays in Giants history.
And we've tried to touch as many eras as we can as well, and great players as we've gone through these. So the interesting thing about the blue bracket, Bob, is the first 5 seeds are all offensive plays for a franchise that's known for their defense.
Yeah, well, offense sells tickets, Johnny. No, but I mean, I think that's one of the things that gets sometimes forgotten about the Giants is if you think about the history of the New York Football Giants, and you could make the case that 3 of the greatest pass plays in the history of the Super Bowl, not the Giants, are plays from the Giants. Whether it's the helmet catch, whether it's a play that's in this bracket, which is the 2nd seed, the Mark Ingram 3rd and 13 catch in Super Bowl 25 against the Bills, or it's the Mario Manningham catch against the Patriots. I mean, some of the most iconic plays in Super Bowl history, pass plays, are from New York Giants.
It is amazing, and let's start, Bob, because you mentioned, let's go 1 and 2 seeds first here. There are 2 plays in very important games. You mentioned the 2 seed. You have the Ingram 3rd and 13 play in Super Bowl 25 where he makes about 6 guys miss on a short pass to get a first down. Unbelievable run after catch. Let's start with that one.
Well, actually, if you think about plays 1 and 2 in this bracket, because play 1 is the Bavaro play against the 49ers on Monday Night Football in 86. If you think about it, I mean, those are individual performances. I mean, Mark Ingram makes almost the entire Bills team miss, and Bavaro carried the entire Niners team. So it's not just that the play was so unbelievable. It's not like they were incredible catches, but what makes them great plays are the individual effort by the player themselves to elevate these to epic plays in Giants history.
All right, and then let's go matchup now for the first one. You have the Bavaro play. You guys have all seen it. Catches over the middle against the 49ers. Guys jump on his back. He's carrying them down the field. Gains another 15 or 20 yards after the catch, despite the fact Niners are hanging off of him. And, Bob, he's going against Jimmy Patton. He had a kick and punt return in the same game for touchdowns. He was the first player to ever do it against rival Washington back in 1955.
Well, obviously Jimmy Patton was one of the great Giants of all time and was part of that defense in the 1950s that people forget that aren't old enough to remember, but the Giants' defense was the toast of the town. Every Giants fan could rattle off the starting Giants defensive unit, and in fact, the defense would be introduced first at home games a lot of the time. So they were sort of the toast of the town. They were the ones that everybody knew, and Jimmy Patton was part of that great unit. And anytime you can get a 50-yard pick six against Pittsburgh is a very significant play. But the significance of the Bavaro play is something that you have to really dive into and take yourself back in time, because the Giants and Niners at this point in time are becoming almost like division rivals. The Giants, who were up and coming in 84, lost the playoff game in San Francisco against the Niners. And then the Giants beat the Niners in the 85 playoffs. And everything was setting up for there was going to be another playoff showdown. And it felt like these teams met every year in the regular season. And there was a commonality and there was a rivalry between these two teams, West Coast, East Coast. If you remember at that time, It was Boston against L.A. in basketball, and it was New York against San Francisco in football. And there was this rivalry that was building between two teams that played different styles of football. The Niners were known for their offense, although their defense was very underrated, and the Giants were known for their defense. And this is on Monday Night Football, and, the Giants are getting destroyed at halftime. They're getting beaten alive. And remember, back then, Monday Night Football started at 9 o'clock. So by the time you got to halftime, especially if you were a little bit younger, I'm sure there were some TVs clicking off. And Bavaro gave the Giants life, and this is a play that I think not only spearheaded them to another playoff win against San Francisco later on at Giant Stadium, but I think this really cemented the rivalry between the Giants and the Niners between 1984 and 1990 season.
Yeah, and a very important game, Bob. And I think the way you characterize the two teams, I think was good, where the Niners were that West Coast offense, Bill Walsh kind of finesse team, and the Giants were the blue-collar, rough and tough team. And that's Bavaro, right? He was the personification of that type of Giants persona, and him just running over and through a 49ers defense, I just think really encapsulated how the Giants fan base really thought about the matchup.
Well, I think it sent a message to the team as well, because, again, they were getting smoked at halftime. I mean, the Niners were having their way with them, and I think this just woke everybody up and realized, hey, we're not going down lightly. We may lose this game, but we're not going down without a fight. And, of course, the Giants went on to win the football game.
And to your point, they would later take on the 49ers in the playoffs and then, of course, have a chance to go to the Super Bowl. All right, so let's go in order now. The winner of that 116 matchup, Bob, will take on the winner of the 8-9 matchup here. Now we have some defensive plays into the mix here, and we'll get to the rest of those offensive plays as we move along. You have Osi Umenyiора's 6th sack, September 30th, 2007. Eagles on a 4th and 18. Osi sacks McNabb, 9-yard sack, forces fumble, team record 6 sack. Giants win that game 16-3. And that goes up against maybe one of the great individual matchups of yesteryear between two Hall of Famers.
Yes, Sam Huff stopping Jim Brown at the goal line. The Browns have to settle for a field goal in that game, and the Giants wind up winning the football game 13-10. Points were at a premium. Tom Landry, who was the Giants' defensive coordinator at the time, came up with the umbrella defense, the 4-3 defense, and it was designed specifically to stop Jim Brown because he was the greatest player in the NFL at that point in time. And in order to run this defense, you needed a middle linebacker, and the Giants had one in Hall of Famer Sam Huff. So this was mano-a-mano. Huff stopping Brown at the goal line. They each had their wins in the battles against each other, but I think this kind of epitomized what the Giants of that era were all about.
No question, and I think that OC 6-sack game with the way that Giants front dominated in that era in 2007 epitomized what that Giants team was all about. Poor Winston Justice was all over the highlights that night, just couldn't block those Giants defensive ends. And OC, who is the quintessential speed rusher, if you talk about all-time NFL, let alone just Giants, was the dominant player in that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if this was this play is really it's more of a moment, right, where you're getting 6 sacks in a game to set a franchise record that's had some great sack artists, starting with Lawrence Taylor, who happened to be in the building that night, and, of course, Michael Strahan. So some of these are individual performances. That was the greatest plays all wrapped up in one for OC. But this is a really tough matchup with two great defensive plays.
It is, absolutely. All right, let's jump to the next one, Bob, the 5 and the 12. And we go back to Homer Jones here. This is that 5th offensive play we talked about in the top 5. A 98-yard touchdown catch from Earl Morrall in that game. The Giants were down 14 in the fourth quarter. They scored 2 touchdowns to come back and win. And I love the stat line from Homer Jones in this game. 2 catches, 173 yards, and 86.5 per catch average with those 2 touchdowns. Of course, Homer Jones also invented the spike, Bob. So this epitomizes Homer Jones and what he could do in one game.
Wasn't there. I was only 2 at the time, but it begs the question, if there was sports talk radio back then, if he had 2 catches for how many yards was it?
It was 173.
Why don't you throw it to him more? But he was a dynamic player. He was a Pro Bowl player. This record of 98 yards stood until 2011 when Victor Cruz broke it on Christmas Eve against the Jets. Truly a great performance by Homer Jones. So, you got to throw that up in there. It goes against a defensive play, though.
Yeah.
Goes against a defensive play, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark Haynes, end zone fumble, gets the touchdown, gives the Giants a 27-7 lead and win over the Eagles on December 27th, 1981. And it's the Giants' first playoff game in 18 years. One of John Mara's favorite Giants teams.
Well, it's interesting. Mark Haynes had a really good Giants career. He spent 6 years with the Giants, and he was not there for Super Bowl 21. But, the guy made 3 Pro Bowls. He was a first-team All-Pro twice. He was a really good football player. And this is very interesting because, growing up, being from the Bronx originally and hearing about the 50s Giants and all that other stuff, my youth was the late 60s and the 70s. So
not the best.
No. So I saw a lot of losses as a kid, and was a very frustrated Giants fan as a kid. And to see them get in the playoffs, Rob Carpenter was the running back for the Giants, to first break through and even get in. And then this improbable end zone fumble recovery that the Giants actually took a dominant lead against an Eagles team that was really good, coached by Dick Vermeil. They were in the Super Bowl the year before, having lost to the Raiders. And the Giants weren't expected to win this football game, especially on the road in Philadelphia. So the Mark Haynes fumble recovery was very significant because it got the Giants out to a big lead, and they wound up advancing.
And whenever you can beat the rival Eagles in a playoff game, and this play was a big part of that, and the Eagles tried to come back. They came back to 27-21, but the Giants held on for the victory. All right, let's go to that 4-13 matchup, Bob. This is one of those 5 offensive plays in the top 5 here. The Hakeem Nicks Hail Mary going down to the end of the first half in the 2011 NFC Championship game against the Packers. Back to throw, Eli Manning. Hakeem Nicks goes up and gets it, and it helped the Giants pull away in a game where they ended up winning fairly comfortably, but at that point, the game was still very much in doubt.
Yeah, and remember, the Packers were the number 1 seed that year.
14-2, if I remember right.
They were one of the they were the best team in the NFC, and there was a play that happened before this play that was significant because Eli Manning late in the first half kind of checks down to Ahmad Bradshaw, and how many times do you see a guy turn upfield, see some daylight, and tries to get more? Bradshaw, who always played with an exceptionally high football IQ, doesn't try to get more yards. He knew I had gotten enough yards to get us in position to try a Hail Mary, and then he just makes a beeline to get out of bounds to stop the clock, which then sets up this play. And it's really kind of interesting because when you watch most Hail Marys, there's a lot of pulling and fighting and tugging. Not really sure what the Packers were doing there because Nicks was able to go up pretty cleanly and make the play, but you're right. It started the route. And this game really in the second half wasn't as close as the final score would indicate. There was a horrible roughing the passer call against the Giants, and Rodgers got a tack-on touchdown to make the score close. But that really did send the number 1 seed back to the locker room at halftime, knowing they looked beaten when they went back to the locker room. And you don't really hear a lot of boos at Lambeau Field, but there was some boos at Lambeau Field that day.
And I just want to throw on top of this, too, it underlines what an unbelievable playoff run Hakeem Nicks had, and, of course, Eli Manning as well in 2011. But Hakeem Nicks, this is when he was at his full powers. He had not dealt with a lot of those lower leg and foot and ankle injuries that really took the juice out of his legs at the end of his career. He was dominant in all the playoff games that year. Nobody could cover that game.
Yeah, he was the guy. Victor Cruz was the guy during the season that made a lot of the big splash plays and hit the home run balls. But in the postseason, Hakeem Nicks made big play after big play after big play, starting with the Falcons game with the cross and where he took off and went for the touchdown to a Hail Mary like this. He was a dominant figure in that postseason. Now, it's going against the Sneakers game from 1934. Think about this. Think about what the equipment was like in 1934. And think about the field conditions. Now the field conditions are all perfect. They're inspected by the league. And when there are problems with a field, a lot of it is kind of nitpicking, But these were like bad fields. These were games played in baseball stadiums. They didn't have the techniques to resod and everything else. And the Giants, because of their connection with Manhattan College, they were able to go get some sneakers because the ground was frozen to get better traction. And Ken Strong going 42 yards on frozen dirt and whatever was left of the grass at the Polo Grounds in 1934 at this time of year, good luck. That has to be one of the greatest performances ever.
Giants win 30-13, and there's another second sneakers game a little bit later on as well. All right, let's go to the next matchup, Bob. We have LT sacking Gary Danielson, who some fans might know is more as a broadcaster now than a quarterback, against the Lions on Thanksgiving. And he's going up against Mel Triplett's 17-yard touchdown run that helped start a 47-7 rout of the Bears in the 1956 NFL Championship game.
Yeah, sneakers game too.
Yep.
And again, put on a pair of basketball sneakers and go run on frozen dirt and grass. And you're going against the Bears in the NFL Championship game. This one was played in Yankee Stadium. 1956 was the Giants' first year in Yankee Stadium. And when you have a 17-yard touchdown run that kicks off a 47-7 rout, certainly one of the greatest plays. And then, this play of Lawrence Taylor just signifies everything. Because he
one hand and just flings him.
One hand, and he remember, these are grown men. It's not like when you're playing with your kid and you're playing Nerf football or something like that.
But that's what it looked
like.
Toss
them around. Exactly. It was the brilliance of Lawrence Taylor. Truly one of the greatest plays in Giants history. Yeah. Just one hand on Thanksgiving. He slammed him down like a turkey leg.
Just took him, slung him around in a circle, and flung him down to the ground. Unbelievable play by LT. All right, let's go to the number 3 seed, number 14 seed. The 3 seed, Bob, might be a play that Giant fans have seen before. Odell Beckham Jr., a big one-handed catch back in 2014 on the sideline against the hated Dallas Cowboys.
Well, yeah, this is a significant play for a zillion different reasons, right? Emojis have made up of it. It sent Odell into a whole different stratosphere with just this one play. The thing about the play that is really so impressive is the fact that Odell was fouled. He was interfered with. And while being interfered with, he's able to make the catch over his head while horizontal. But he doesn't fall out of bounds. He doesn't lose the football as he makes contact with the ground. And there were a lot of people that were watching in real time. They're like, oh, I think he caught it. And then it was like, oh, yeah, and he even scored a touchdown out of it. It from an individual greatest play standpoint, it certainly is one of the most athletic, dynamic catches in the history of the National Football League.
And we had seen one-handed catches in the NFL before that, Bob, but it was oftentimes guys cuffing the ball, cupping the ball. This was the first time, really, with the new era in these new wide receiver gloves that are extra sticky, where the guy catches it like a baseball. He caught the football like a baseball, one-handed in his fingers, and now all wide receivers try to do that sort of stuff now, but this was really the first.
All wide receivers, yeah. How about like kids playing flag football? Still try to do the Odell. Which I would not recommend for your kid whose hand's not big enough to try to do the Odell, and they try to do it, and they usually drop it.
I feel like you've had that conversation with your son before, Bob.
My sons. Yeah, it's an incredible, unbelievably gifted play. The Giants didn't win that game, and it turned out to not be a playoff year or anything like that, but from an individual greatest play, it certainly deserves its place in this bracket.
But a tough matchup against another significant play. This one, a game winner. Eli Manning, a 2-yard touchdown pass to Amani Toome with 5 seconds left to beat the Broncos 24-23, October 23rd, 2005 at Giant Stadium. The last game Wellington Mara would be able to watch before he unfortunately passed away.
And everybody knew it. Everybody knew that Mr. Mara was sick. I think this game has such elevated significance. The Odell play is the Odell play, and it's one of the great individual plays. But now when you take a look at this game winner in the context of what was happening. This is Eli's first year as the starting quarterback. The Giants are in position to get to the playoffs for the first time with Eli Manning as the starting quarterback. The Denver Broncos were a very good football team. And this is almost history redone because of the Kent Graham to Amani Toomer touchdown pass a couple of seasons earlier when the Broncos were undefeated. I think the significance of this play with 5 seconds remaining and the fact that Toomer, who had beaten the Broncos a time before with a touchdown catch, and it's Eli's first year, and obviously with Mr. Mara being sick and everybody knowing that he was going to pass short, at pretty close, I think the significance of what this meant and the fact that it happened in a home game at Giants Stadium, pretty significant play in Giants history.
No question about it. Let's jump to the next matchup here, Bob. The 7 seed. Rosie blocks 3 men. Rosie Brown, one of the greatest Giants in history, dominating the Eagles in this matchup. A 1975 Pro Football Hall of Famer, Bob. One of the best value draft picks in the history of the NFL. A 27th round draft pick turns into one of the best offensive tackles of all time.
It's a 2 different era matchup because it's going against number 10, Mel Hines' 50-yard pick 6 against the Green Bay Packers. The only touchdown of his 15-year career because the guy played center. But
by the way, he did more than that, though. He played all over the field. He played defense, too.
Right. Well, back then they played both ways. First of all, let's start with Roosevelt Brown because not only is he one of the greatest Giants of all time, but he's one of the greatest left tackles in the history of the sport. If you break it down, obviously the size and the guys are much bigger and stronger and faster now. But when you put it in relative terms, from a technique standpoint, Rosie Brown is mentioned not only in Giants circles, but he's mentioned in NFL circles when people talk about the greatest offensive lineman. And Rosie spent a long time with the Giants as part of the organization, being a part of the coaching staff. And then, what do you say about Mel Hines? He's a Hall of Famer as well. This is a battle of Hall of Famers. And in an era where guys played both ways and a guy that was not necessarily known for his speed, 50-yard pick 6 against the Green Bay Packers back in 38 when the Packers and Giants were always contending for championships. Enough said.
I admit, I was not as familiar as I should have been with Mel Hines, Bob. I'm sure younger Giant fans have probably heard the name, but they don't understand how great of a player he was. Can you put Mel Hines into context for maybe some of the younger fans out there?
Well, he's when you get into the Hall of Fame and like the first class of the Hall of Fame, that means something. And he was a dominant player. Again, the game was so different back then. And, most of the guys had to play 2 ways, but, he was a star in a young National Football League and a guy that helped the Giants be one of the prominent teams in the National Football League and win an early championship.
All right, our final matchup, the 2 and 15 seed, Bob. We already talked about the 2 seed, the Mark Ingram 3rd and 13 catch against the Bills in Super Bowl 25. Really unbelievable play that sets up Otis Anderson's touchdown run. And that's taking on Amani Toomer's toe drag play against Green Bay. Really, and I had forgotten about this play, Bob. Then I watched a video in preparation for this. It's that NFC Championship game in the cold weather against the Packers in 2007. Diving play over the sideline, not to the sideline, over the sideline. As he gets to the ground, he gets that second toe in to catch the pass on the sideline. Unbelievable catch, especially given the conditions.
Yeah, it's not like he just dragged his toe and got it in. Amani was horizontal, and it looked like the one toe wasn't going to get in. But to have the body control, and I know Amani worked very hard on his conditioning. I know he had used martial arts earlier in his career for body control. And when you think about the significance, because every possession counted in that game. Every possession was so critical. And when you take a look at the weather conditions, what he was about to land on, a frozen field, and then to have the wherewithal to be able to get that second toe down, it truly is one of the great individual plays, especially when you think about the significance of it, with it happening in an NFC Championship game with a chance to go to the Super Bowl.
And maintaining control, too. You mentioned he lands arms first. That's the first thing that hits the ground in a play, in his arms, which are cuffing the ball. And he holds on to it despite the fact that ground was like concrete.
Yeah, he had it locked in. He was Listen, he's the Giants' all-time leading receiver for a reason. And again, significance. I put into this significance when he did it, where he did it, what was at stake. Elevates it for me. But I think the matchup that he's going against is a pretty tough one because, again, the Giants, number 2 is Mark Ingram's 3rd and 13 conversion in Super Bowl 25, which we touched upon at the beginning. It sets up Otis Anderson's touchdown run. But really, if you think about it, the Giants' game plan, they had the ball for 40 minutes in that game. Everybody knew about the K-gun offense and the Buffalo Bills and keep the ball away. So the Giants kept the ball away and had the ball for 40 minutes. So every third down conversion was critical because if you don't convert, you're giving them the ball back. And at this point in the game, they hadn't figured out yet that, let's see, the Giants really don't have any D linemen in the game and maybe one guy's hands in the dirt. Maybe we should try to run it. Fortunately for the Giants, Buffalo never picked up on that cue until the end of the game when it was too late. But this was significant. I mean, again, every possession, keep away. And Ingram's individual effort on this play, eluding tacklers, darting, dancing, but then the whole end of the play where he's being grabbed around the ankle and like you would a little kid trying to hold on to your leg as you drag him across the carpet, he's dragging and hopping on one leg to get what was needed for the first down. Truly, in my opinion, one of the most incredible plays in Giants history.
Yeah, and I love this bracket, Bob, because you mentioned there are so many games that have significance in it. NFC title game with the tumor toe drag, Ingram in the Super Bowl, Triplets 56 title game touchdown play. You have the sneakers game in here, right? You have the Wellington Mara, his final game that he's able to watch in here. The rivalry game and the Monday night game with Bavaro against San Francisco. Rivalry win with Osi against the Eagles. Sam Huff stopping Jim Brown in a championship game. I mean, there's so many games of significance.
Yeah, I mean, because the Giants and Browns are playing week after week here. They're playing at the end of the season. They're playing in the postseason with the right to go to the championship game. You know, in the Eastern Conference, the road went through those two teams. So the significance of the games in this bracket are pretty amazing.
It really is. Bob, awesome stuff. Always fun to catch up on the greatest play. So stay tuned to everything we're doing with the 100th anniversary podcast, folks, and all of our celebrations, social media, Giants.com, the Giants app, and, of course, stay tuned to all of the Giants social media channels. Go to Giants.com/podcast, the Giants app, for all of the Giants podcast offerings. For Bob Papa, I'm John Schmuck. Thanks for being with us on the Greatest Plays Bracket podcast, brought to you by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better.